The groceries in my arms felt heavier than usual as I balanced them against my hip and fumbled for my keys. It was supposed to be a normal Friday. Same routine. Same quiet welcome. I imagined Jenna calling out from the kitchen like she used to, the kids bickering about something small, the smell of dinner hanging in the air. I smiled to myself, tired but content. I had no idea I was walking into the end of my life as I knew it. When the front door swung open, I was hit by a wave of sound, laughter, clapping, the sharp pop of a champagne cork, and a mess of color. Balloons floated against the ceiling, confetti drifted lazily through the air, and a cake sat proudly on the table. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten a birthday. Maybe Jenna had thrown a surprise party for someone and forgot to tell me. But then I saw her. Jenna stood in the center of the room, one hand on her hip, the other holding a wine glass, grinning like a cat that just caught a bird. Sophie and Noah were there too, standing awkwardly by the staircase, and next to Jenna, someone I had never seen before, a man with too much cologne and a smug look on his face. He had his arm lazily draped around her waist like it belonged there. My stomach tightened. Surprise, Jenna announced, her voice bright and sharp as broken glass. She raised her glass higher. We're leaving you. For a second, I thought I must have misheard. Leaving me? This had to be some kind of bad joke. But Jenna just laughed, and the man beside her chuckled too, like they were sharing a private joke at my expense. I stood there in the doorway, frozen. The grocery bag slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud, cans rolling out and spinning away across the hardwood. I didn't move to pick them up. I just stared. Jenna took a long sip from her glass and then sauntered toward me like she was presenting some grand prize. Thanks for everything, she said sweetly, almost mockingly. Thanks for paying off the mortgage. Thanks for covering my student loans. You really set us up nicely. Her words hit harder than any punch. I turned my gaze to Sophie. Her eyes were wide and watery, her hands clutching the hem of her sweatshirt. Noah looked confused, clutching the banister, as if trying to hold himself up. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them smiled. Derek. I would learn his name later, but in that moment he was just the stranger, didn't even have the decency to look away. He smirked at me like he'd won some kind of prize, like he was proud of it. I opened my mouth, maybe to ask why, maybe to scream, maybe to laugh at the insanity of it all, but nothing came out. Only a deep, raw silence filled my lungs. I looked around the house I had worked so hard to build. Every wall, every floorboard, every light fixture bore the mark of my sacrifice. The late nights, the double shifts. The days Jenna cried over her tuition bills, and I picked up another freelance job to make sure she could graduate debt-free. The family vacations I skipped to catch up on mortgage payments. The birthday gifts I passed on so we could build something lasting. And now, I was being thrown out like yesterday's trash. No fight, no apology, just a celebration and a cake. I took a slow breath and walked to the kitchen counter. My keys felt heavy in my hand. I set them down gently next to the sink, next to the bouquet of congratulations balloons bobbing innocently on their ribbons. I didn't look at Jenna. I didn't look at Derek. I didn't say a word. Noah made a tiny noise, a broken sound, almost like a whimper, but Jenna didn't even notice. She was too busy clinking glasses with Derek. I knelt down slowly, picked up the cans from the floor, placed them carefully back into the bag. One by one. No rush. No noise. The world around me faded into a dull hum. As I stood up, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the hallway mirror. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. Tired eyes. Slumped shoulders. A man who had given everything for a dream he thought they all shared. Maybe the saddest part was, I wasn't even angry. Not yet. Just empty. I straightened my shoulders, turned without a word, and walked out the door. Behind me, I heard Jenna laugh again, a sharp, glittering sound like broken glass falling to the floor. The door slammed shut with a finality that felt almost merciful. Outside, the sun was setting in thick bands of red and gold, bleeding across the sky. I stood on the porch for a moment, feeling the cool air cut through my shirt. I thought about turning back, about demanding answers, about fighting. But then, what was left to fight for? I had built the foundation. I had handed over the keys. They had celebrated my usefulness and discarded me. Turning back wouldn't undo that. I pulled my wallet from my pocket and looked at the crumpled $20 bill inside. That was all I had on me. No plan. No destination. Just freedom, raw and terrifying. I stepped off the porch and walked down the driveway. Past the car I had bought for Jenna. Past the basketball hoop I had installed for Noah's last birthday. past the flower bed Sophie and I had planted together 2 summers ago. The house, their house now, loomed behind me like a tombstone. At the end of the street, I didn't look back. Not once. I kept walking into the growing night, feeling the cold settle into my bones. Somewhere out there, a new life was waiting. I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know who I would become. But I knew one thing as sure as I knew my own name. I was never coming back to that house again. Not as the fool they had celebrated. Not as the man they had discarded. If they wanted a world without me, they had it. And when they realized what they had lost, when the balloons sagged and the cake rotted and the laughter turned to silence, I wouldn't be there to see it. I disappeared into the darkness, feeling lighter with every step. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't scare me. It set me free. I drove for hours without really knowing where I was going. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I just let the road stretch out in front of me, endless and dark, like a tunnel with no exit. The last bit of sunlight had disappeared, and the sky above was heavy and black. Headlights from oncoming cars flashed past like ghosts. I barely noticed them. Somewhere between one gas station and the next, I realized I had crossed the state line. It didn't feel like freedom yet. Just space. Empty, quiet space where nobody knew my name. Nobody expected anything from me, and nobody would throw a party when they were done using me. Around midnight, I found a worn-out motel just off the highway, tucked between a diner and a closed-down car wash. The neon sign flickered like it was on its last breath, Riverside Inn. It wasn't by any river I could see, and it wasn't much of an inn either, more like a row of tired doors and dusty windows. But it would do. I parked my car under a broken light and grabbed the only thing I had brought with me, my wallet. My hands shook a little as I checked in. The night manager didn't ask any questions. He just slid a key across the counter and pointed down the hall. Room 12 smelled like bleach and old cigarettes. The bedspread was scratchy. The lamp by the bed wobbled when I touched it. I didn't care. I locked the door, pulled the chair across it for good measure, and collapsed onto the mattress without even taking off my shoes. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my body completely still but my mind racing. I thought about Jenna's laugh, the way it had cut through me sharper than any knife. I thought about Sophie's wide, scared eyes. Noah's tiny shoulders hunched with confusion. I thought about the keys on the counter, the confetti on the floor, the cake that must still be sitting there, waiting for them to slice it up and serve pieces of my life to their guests. I thought about all of it, and then I forced myself to stop. The stillness was heavier than the noise. Heavier than the anger, even. It sat on my chest, thick and immovable. But for the first time, nobody was pulling at me. Nobody was asking for money or homework help or one more sacrifice. It was just me. I don't remember falling asleep. Only that when I woke up the next morning, sunlight was slanting through the gaps in the curtains, and someone was banging on the wall next door. I sat up slowly, feeling like I had been hit by a truck. There was a diner across the parking lot. I shuffled over there around noon, still wearing yesterday's clothes. The waitress, a woman with a kind face and tired eyes, didn't ask any questions either. She poured me coffee without a word and left me alone in a corner booth. I was grateful for it. Halfway through my plate of greasy eggs and burnt toast, a man slid into the seat across from me. I looked up, startled, but he just nodded like we were old friends. "You staying over at Riverside?" he asked, his voice rough like sandpaper. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, for now." He stuck out a hand. "Name's Pete Langford. I own the garage down the road. You look like you could use some work." I didn't know whether to laugh or be offended. Maybe both. Instead, I shook his hand. His grip was firm, steady. "I'm Jason," I said, giving my real name without thinking. There didn't seem much point in lying. "And yeah, I could use some work." Pete leaned back in the booth, studying me like a mechanic studies a busted engine. "You any good with your hands?" I thought about all the years of patching up that house. Leaky faucets, broken door frames, busted heaters. I thought about the nights I spent fixing problems nobody else even noticed, just so my family could have it a little easier. "I can figure things out," I said quietly. Pete grinned. "Good enough. Come by the shop tomorrow. Could use someone who doesn't mind getting their hands dirty." He stood up, slapped a few bills on the table for his coffee, and was gone before I could even thank him. The rest of that day blurred together. I walked around town, such as it was. A main street with a grocery store, a laundromat, a pawn shop, a gas station with one working pump. Not much else. But it felt different, slower. Nobody looked at me twice. Nobody cared where I came from or why I was there. I went back to the motel and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the burner phone I had bought at the gas station. I hadn't turned it on yet. I didn't want to. I knew the second I did, the outside world would come rushing back. Jenna. Maybe Sophie. Maybe even the courts. I put the phone in the drawer and closed it firmly. That night, I worked my muscles until they ached. I tightened the loose screws on the chair. I fixed the lamp by the bed. I even cleaned the grout in the bathroom because I needed to feel useful, even if it was only for myself. When I finally crawled into bed, I waited for the familiar dread to creep in, the what-ifs, the regrets, the self-loathing that usually kept me awake. But it didn't come. For the first time in years, my body gave up fighting and just slept. No nightmares. No cold sweats. No jerking awake at 3 a.m. to stare at the ceiling fan and wonder how everything had gone so wrong. Just deep, honest sleep. The kind you can't fake. The kind you don't even realize you've been missing until you finally feel it again. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through the window and a strange feeling in my chest. Not peace, not yet. But something close. A quietness. A stillness. A small, stubborn root of hope, planted deep where Jenna's laughter couldn't touch it. I stretched my arms over my head and smiled to myself. It wasn't much. A room that smelled like bleach. A job fixing broken engines. A $20 burner phone in a drawer. But it was mine. For the first time in a long time, everything I had left was mine. 2 weeks passed like smoke through my fingers. Every day started the same. Coffee from the diner, long hours at Pete's garage, the smell of grease and old tires filling my lungs. Evenings spent staring out the window of room 12, watching moths batter themselves against the neon lights. Nights where, if I was lucky, sleep came easily and guilt stayed locked outside the door. I didn't turn on the burner phone once. I told myself it was for the best. That silence was better than chaos. That not knowing was safer. But even in that stillness, a part of me was bracing, waiting for the world I'd left behind to come crashing through the walls. It didn't take long. One afternoon, while I was replacing a busted alternator in an old Chevy, Pete came out of the office with a paper bag in one hand and the burner phone in the other. "Your bag's buzzing," he said, tossing it onto the workbench beside me. I stared at it like it was a live grenade. The screen lit up. Jenna. I didn't move. Didn't touch it. Just watched as the phone vibrated itself into silence again. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. This time, a different name flashed across the screen. April. My sister. My chest tightened. I wiped my hands on a rag and grabbed the phone, hesitating just a second before answering. "Jason, what the hell did you do to them?" April's voice exploded into my ear, sharp and furious. I blinked, stunned. "What are you talking about?" "They're losing their minds," she shouted. "Jenna's blowing up my phone. Mom called me in the middle of the night saying you disappeared. Derek's in the hospital. The kids are living at Jenna's mom's house. What did you do?" I leaned heavily against the bench, the room spinning for a moment. "I didn't do anything," I said slowly. "I left." "You left?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "You can't just disappear. You're their father." I closed my eyes. I could picture April pacing her kitchen, her messy ponytail, her bare feet slapping the tile floor. She always cared too much. About me. About everyone. "I didn't disappear," I said quietly. I removed myself. "There's a difference." There was a long silence on the other end. I heard her breathing, fast and shallow. "They're falling apart, Jason," she said, softer now. "You need to come back." I let the words hang between us. Come back to what? To Jenna and her new boyfriend playing house? To a home that wasn't mine anymore? "I can't," I said, my voice breaking a little. "I won't." April cursed under her breath. "At least talk to Sophie. She's been asking for you." That cut deeper than anything else could have. Sophie, my sweet, sensitive girl, caught in the middle of this wreckage. I pressed the heel of my hand against my forehead, willing myself to stay strong. "I'll call her when I'm ready," I said. "Don't wait too long," April warned. "Kids don't stay the same forever." Before I could answer, she hung up. I stood there for a long time, the phone heavy in my hand, Pete watching me from the office window. Finally, I shoved the phone into my pocket and got back to work, forcing myself to focus on bolts and belts and things I could fix, not the mess I had left behind. That night, alone in my room, I turned the phone on again. 43 missed calls, 17 voicemails. Half from Jenna, half from numbers I didn't recognize. And then, tucked between all the chaos, a single text from an unknown number. This isn't your fault. They do this to everyone. Watch your back. No name. No explanation. Just that chilling warning. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then I set the phone on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. The floodgates had opened. By morning, the motel manager slipped a yellow envelope under my door. No return address. Inside were copies of documents, medical reports, screenshots of social media posts, a police incident report with Derek's name on it. According to the reports, Derek had been admitted to the hospital after an altercation at a bar. Witnesses said he was drunk, aggressive, and got thrown out by security. Jenna had posted smiling selfies from the hospital waiting room, pretending it was all some minor accident. Nothing to see here, folks. Just another perfect day in her perfect, shiny life. Except, it wasn't perfect. It was cracking. I didn't know who had sent me the envelope, but I had a guess. Somewhere out there, someone knew Jenna and Derek's game. Someone who had been burned by them before. I thought again about the text message. They do this to everyone. A knock at the door jolted me out of my thoughts. I opened it to find Pete standing there with a six-pack in one hand and a paper bag in the other. "Looked like you could use some company," he said simply. I didn't argue. I stepped aside, and he came in, dropping onto the battered chair like he owned the place. He cracked open a beer and tossed me one. We sat there in silence for a while, drinking and watching the sun dip below the horizon. "You don't have to tell me," Pete said eventually. "But you should know, whatever's chasing you. You don't have to run forever." I turned the bottle in my hands, watching the condensation drip down my fingers. "Maybe I'm not running," I said. "Maybe I'm finally standing still." Pete grunted like he understood, and maybe he did. The thing about broken men is, they recognize each other. You don't need to share your whole story. The cracks show through no matter how hard you try to hide them. After Pete left, I sat up late, flipping through the envelope again, reading every word, memorizing every detail. If Jenna thought I would come crawling back to fix her mess, she didn't know me as well as she thought. Not anymore. I wasn't the same man who begged her to stay years ago when she threatened to leave. I wasn't the man who stretched himself thinner and thinner trying to be enough. I had walked away once, and if I had to, I would keep walking, even if it broke me all over again. I turned out the light and lay back on the bed, the envelope tucked safely under my pillow, the burner phone within arm's reach. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Probably more screaming, more lies, more attempts to drag me back into their circus. But for tonight, there was only the sound of the motel's broken air conditioner rattling in the window, and the soft, steady beating of my own heart, refusing to quit. The morning started the same as most. A lukewarm cup of motel coffee, the dusty sun pouring through thin curtains, the steady hum of cars rolling by on the highway. I had almost convinced myself it would be a normal day, the kind where nothing from the past found me. But when I opened the door to grab the newspaper Pete always had delivered, I spotted them, 3 envelopes, slid carefully under my door during the night. No stamps, no markings, just my name, written in different hands, pressed hard enough to nearly rip the paper. For a long minute, I just stared at them. I didn't want to pick them up. Part of me wanted to turn around, crawl back into bed, and pretend they weren't there. But I couldn't. I knew better. Ignoring things never made them disappear. I bent down slowly, picked them up, and shut the door behind me, the click of the lock sounding too loud in the tiny room. I sat on the edge of the bed, the envelopes spread out across my lap. 3 of them. 3 different storms waiting to be unleashed. I ran my fingers over the first one, the one written in Jenna's familiar, sharp handwriting. I ripped it open without ceremony. Her letter was everything I expected and nothing that surprised me. Apologies scrawled across the page like spilled paint, messy, frantic, impossible to believe. She missed me. She didn't know what went wrong. She needed me to come back and fix everything before it was too late. Her words twisted my. Not for her, but for the man I used to be. The man who would have read that letter and rushed back without a second thought. He was gone now, buried under layers of betrayal too deep to dig through. I set Jenna's letter aside and picked up the second envelope. This one was lighter. The handwriting was hesitant, a little messy. Sophie. I swallowed hard and opened it carefully, as if the paper itself might break. Her letter was short. No fancy words. No big explanations. Just the raw honesty of a 14-year-old girl who didn't understand why the world she knew was falling apart. "Dad, are you mad at me too?" I didn't know what to do. "I miss you. Noah cries at night. Please come home. Please." Each word cut deeper than the last. I could see her face as she wrote it, the way she chewed her pen when she was nervous, the way she pressed too hard on the paper when she was trying not to cry. I closed my eyes and let out a slow, shaky breath. She wasn't part of Jenna's mess. Neither was Noah. They were just kids caught in a storm they didn't start, trying to find something solid to hold on to. I folded Sophie's letter carefully, smoothing the creases with my thumb, and placed it on the nightstand. A promise to answer her. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But soon. I had to find the right words, the kind that didn't make false promises but still gave her hope. Finally, I picked up the last envelope. This one wasn't addressed at all, just my name, printed in block letters, as if the sender had wanted to stay hidden. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a voicemail transcript scribbled in rushed handwriting. It was from someone named Dana Reyes. I didn't recognize the name at first, but as I read the message, a sinking feeling began to take root. You don't know me, but you should know the truth. Jenna and Derek? This isn't new. They do this to people. Use them, bleed them dry, leave them behind. Derek's been down this road before. So has Jenna. You didn't break anything. They were broken long before you got there. Protect yourself. Don't believe the apologies. Don't let them pull you back. No signature. No return address. Just that chilling warning and the weight of understanding dropping heavily onto my chest. It all made a cruel kind of sense. The whirlwind romance Jenna claimed she had with Derek. The way she suddenly turned cold after years of struggle together. The timing. The betrayal. The laughter as she watched me walk away. I had always thought I must have failed somewhere. That I hadn't worked hard enough, loved strong enough, provided enough. But maybe, just maybe, it was never about what I did or didn't do. Maybe I had been a stepping stone all along, a solid foundation Jenna could use until she found a shinier option. And now the cracks were showing in their new fairy tale. Derek was in the hospital. Jenna was desperate. Sophie was scared. And someone, maybe Dana, had decided I deserved to know the truth. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letters spread out before me like pieces of a broken puzzle. A knock at the door made me jump. It was Pete, holding a brown paper bag with lunch in it. He took one look at my face and didn't ask any questions. Just handed me the bag and nodded toward the letters. Ghost from home, he asked gruffly. Yeah, I said, my voice rough. You gonna answer them? I thought about it. About rushing back. About grabbing the wheel and trying to steer the crashing car Jenna had turned our family into. About slipping back into the role of fixer, savior, martyr. No, I said finally. Not yet. Pete nodded like he understood. He didn't push. He just patted my shoulder once, solid, grounding, and left me to my thoughts. I spent the rest of the day in the garage, throwing myself into work like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. Grease under my nails, sweat down my back, the comforting simplicity of busted engines and stripped bolts. Problems with clear solutions. That night, I sat at the small, wobbly motel desk and wrote a letter back to Sophie. Careful, slow words. Not promises I couldn't keep, but the kind of truth she deserved. I'm still here, Sophie. I miss you too. I'm thinking about you and Noah every day. You didn't do anything wrong. I love you. Always will. I just need some time to figure things out. Please be patient with me. We'll find our way through this. I promise. I folded it neatly and slid it into an envelope, planning to mail it the next morning. As for Jenna's letter, I set it on fire in the bathroom sink, watching the paper curl and blacken until there was nothing left but ash. Some bridges weren't meant to be crossed again, and some goodbyes needed to be permanent. When I finally climbed into bed, I felt a strange peace settle over me. Heavy but real. I wasn't running anymore. I was rebuilding, one broken piece at a time. The next morning, I mailed the letter to Sophie. I stood there at the tiny post office, the old ceiling fan creaking overhead, watching the woman behind the counter stamp it like it was any other piece of mail. I almost wanted to shout after it, to make sure she knew how much that letter carried. But of course, she didn't. No one could see how heavy a few simple words were when your whole life was hanging by a thread. Afterward, I sat in my car with the engine idling, staring at the cracked windshield, feeling like I was sitting at a crossroads. I could drive home. I could storm back into that broken house and demand answers, demand my life back. Part of me itched for it. The anger, the confrontation, the messy, ugly explosion. But another part of me, the quieter, smarter part, whispered that there was a better way. That's when I remembered Victor Lane. Victor and I had been friends back in college. He was one of the sharpest guys I had ever met, Quick on his feet, ruthless when he needed to be, but fair. Last I heard, he had gone into family law. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew if anyone could help me navigate this minefield without blowing myself up, it would be him. I pulled out my burner phone, scrolled through the contacts, most of them empty, and dialed the number I barely remembered. It rang twice before someone picked up. Victor Lane, a crisp voice answered. I cleared my throat. Vic, it's Jason Hart. There was a beat of silence, then a chuckle. Jason. Damn, man. It's been a long time. Yeah, I said. My mouth felt dry. Listen, I need some advice. Some legal advice. His tone shifted instantly, professional and sharp. What's going on? I leaned back in the seat, staring up at the peeling roof of the car. It's a long story. I've got time, Victor said. Start talking. So I did. I told him everything, the balloons, the cake, Jenna's announcement, the kids, the letters, Derek, Dana's warning. I laid it all out, not holding anything back. When I finally finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Jason, Victor said slowly, you did exactly the right thing by walking away. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But you're not done yet, he added. If you want to protect yourself and your kids, you need to be smart. Jenna's not going to go down quietly. People like her? They'll spin any story to make themselves the victim. You can't fight fire with fire here. You have to fight it with facts. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. What do I do? First, he said, you stay silent. No dramatic texts, no confrontations, no threats. Document everything. Save every message, every voicemail, every letter. Second, you need to officially establish that you didn't abandon the kids. She's going to try to paint you as the deadbeat dad who ran off. My stomach twisted. But I didn't abandon them. I know, Victor said. And we're going to prove it. We'll file for emergency custody if things get worse, especially if she's neglecting them to chase her boyfriends around. I rubbed my forehead. It's already bad, Vic. Sophie's scared. Noah's confused. Jenna's a mess. Then it's just a matter of time, he said. Give her enough rope, Jason. People like her always hang themselves eventually. He gave me a list of things to start gathering, records, receipts, old emails, anything that showed my involvement with the kids. I thanked him, feeling a little steadier, a little less like I was standing on a crumbling cliff. Before we hung up, he said something that stuck with me. Jason, remember this. You're not fighting Jenna. You're fighting for Sophie and Noah. Keep your head clear. You're not their pawn anymore. You're their shield. The call ended, and I sat there for a long time, feeling the weight of it settle in my bones. That night, I started building my armor. I pulled out every piece of evidence I had. Photos of me coaching Noah's soccer team. Receipts from school field trips. Emails to teachers. Birthday party invitations. I even dug up the family budget spreadsheet I had made. The one Jenna had laughed at and ignored, showing all the bills I paid, every sacrifice I made. I scanned them onto an old laptop Pete lent me, organized them into folders, documented every missed call from Jenna, every voicemail, every text. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making her pay. It was about building a wall so strong, so solid, that when she tried to storm my life again, she would slam into it and fall. 2 days later, Victor called me again. Got some news, he said. Not surprising, but still, you need to hear it. I braced myself. What? Jenna tried to file a restraining order against you. My mouth dropped open. What? Don't worry, he said calmly. It didn't stick. She had no evidence. No incidents. Nothing. The judge threw it out immediately. But it shows you how desperate she's getting. She's trying to paint you as the bad guy. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Unbelievable. Victor's voice softened slightly. Jason, it's a good thing. Desperation makes people sloppy. She's crumbling faster than you realize. Just keep your distance. Keep your hands clean. When this all comes to court, and it will, we'll be ready. For the first time since that awful day with the balloons and the cake, I felt something sharp and unfamiliar flicker in my chest. Hope. It wasn't over. I wasn't beaten. I hadn't lost my kids, my dignity, or my future. Not yet. And maybe, just maybe, I never would. After I hung up, I sat back and stared at the ceiling for a long time, letting the stillness wrap around me like a blanket. They had tried to erase me. They had celebrated my departure. But they didn't realize something important. I wasn't a man you could erase. I wasn't a man you could replace. I was the foundation they had built their dreams on. And now that they had kicked it out from under themselves, The entire house was beginning to crumble. And I would be there, not to catch them, but to catch my kids, and rebuild something real, something honest, something no one could ever take away from me again. The days stretched out slow and strange after my call with Victor. Every morning, I woke early, made myself a cheap cup of motel coffee, and went to work at Pete's garage. Grease on my hands, sweat on my back, and the constant roar of engines filled my mind enough to push away the questions that sometimes clawed at the edges of my peace. Most of the time, I stayed away from town gossip. I didn't need to know what Jenna was doing. I didn't need to track every bad decision she made. But trouble has a way of finding you when people are watching, and it wasn't long before bits and pieces started drifting in like smoke under the door. It started with the school. Pete's niece, who worked part-time at the local elementary, came by the shop one afternoon to pick up her car. As she waited, flipping through a magazine in the dusty lobby, she glanced over at me and said casually, "You know that lady from the next town over? Jenna Hart?" Big scene at the elementary school. I stiffened, trying to keep my face blank. What happened? She shrugged, but her voice carried that careful curiosity people get when they're trying not to sound nosy. Her little boy, Noah, got sent to the counselor. Crying all the time. Said he misses his dad. Teacher said he's been acting out. Lot of fighting. Sad, really. I nodded stiffly, wiping my hands on a rag, pretending not to feel the way the words punched me straight in the gut. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my burner phone, scrolling through updates I'd saved without reading. Another message from April. Noah got suspended for punching a kid today. Said the boy called you a loser. Another voicemail from Victor. We've got evidence stacking up, Jason. Her negligence is showing. Be patient. It's coming apart. I pressed my hands over my face, feeling the slow burn of helplessness crawl up my spine. My son, my sweet boy, fighting strangers because he didn't know how else to defend the man who was supposed to be right there beside him. The next crack in Jenna's perfect world came 2 days later. Pete was wiping down the counter when he leaned toward me and said quietly, "You know Ms. Graves? Counselor at Willow Creek Elementary." I nodded. Sophie had seen Ms. Graves a few times after some bullying incidents last year. She was one of the good ones. Someone who actually cared. She filed a report, Pete said, dropping his voice. Anonymous tip. Said there's concerns about the home situation. Kids showing signs of neglect. Emotional abuse, maybe. My throat tightened. Social services got involved, Pete added. Quiet visit. Jenna wasn't happy. I could imagine it. Jenna's fake smile, the sweet voice hiding the fury underneath as she tried to convince them everything was fine. Probably dragging the kids into posed pictures, baking cookies she wouldn't let them eat, trying to slap together the illusion of a perfect home on short notice. But you can't fake stability. Not for long. Especially not when the cracks are wide enough for everyone to see. I didn't celebrate hearing the news. It didn't make me feel triumphant or smug. It made me feel sick. Because while Jenna's world crumbled, Sophie and Noah were the ones buried under the debris. And I couldn't pull them out yet. I had to be patient. Victor's voice echoed in my head. Give her enough rope. So I waited. And I documented. Every missed call. Every voicemail where Jenna's voice went from tearful to shrieking to suspiciously sweet in under a minute. Every social media post she made, painting herself as a struggling single mother abandoned by a selfish, useless husband. The more she spun her story, the more the truth slipped through the cracks. Photos surfaced of her out at bars, clinging to men who weren't Derek. Pictures where Sophie sat forgotten in the background, eyes hollow. Comments on her posts from friends, joking about wild nights and leaving the baggage behind. Screenshots. Saved. Witnesses. Lined up. It wasn't just me who saw it anymore. It was teachers, neighbors, friends who used to laugh at her jokes and now looked away. Jenna had spent years building a tower out of lies and carefully posed images. Now I watched from a safe distance as it collapsed, brick by brick, under the weight of her own arrogance. And the worst part? She didn't even realize it was happening. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, Pete and I sat out behind the garage, sipping cold sodas and listening to the crickets. You think she knows yet? Pete asked, tipping his chair back against the wall. I shook my head. No. People like her, they never see it coming. They think they're bulletproof. Untouchable. Pete grunted. Pride's a hell of a drug. We sat there a while longer, watching the stars come out one by one. I thought about Sophie, about Noah, about the life we could have had if things had gone differently. But wishing doesn't change reality. And the reality was this. Jenna had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. Late that night, my phone buzzed against the nightstand. A text from Victor. Court date set. 3 weeks. Hang tight. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart pounding slow and heavy in my chest. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until everything came to light. 3 weeks until Jenna faced the consequences of the house she burned down with her own hands. 3 weeks until I could finally stand in front of a judge and show, with quiet certainty, that I hadn't abandoned my family. I had survived them. The stillness settled over me again, not the heavy kind that smothered you, but the clean, steady kind that comes when you know, deep down, you did the right thing. I climbed into bed, pulling the rough motel blanket up to my chest. The world outside kept spinning. Jenna kept spiraling. The noise would keep getting louder, the accusations nastier, the lies thicker. But none of it could touch me. I had already walked through the fire. And now, I was just watching from the other side, safe and whole. Watching the house of cards collapse, and knowing, finally, that I didn't have to save it. I just had to save the ones worth saving. The morning of the leak started like any other. I was halfway through rotating tires on an old Ford pickup when Pete stomped into the garage, waving his phone in the air like it was on fire. "You're going to want to see this," he said, breathless, a wild look in his eye. I wiped my hands on a rag and took the phone, expecting bad news. Another mess Jenna had dragged my kids into. Maybe another desperate stunt to make herself look like a victim. But what I saw made my stomach flip in a way I didn't expect. It was a video. Grainy footage, probably from a bystander's phone, showing Jenna sitting at an outdoor cafe with a man. Not Derek, someone else. Someone I recognized instantly even though I hadn't seen him in years. Cameron Price, our old neighbor. The man who used to mow his lawn shirtless whenever Jenna was home alone. The man who accidentally texted her at midnight more times than I could count. They were laughing, leaning close, sipping champagne like they hadn't a care in the world. And off to the side, barely visible, was Sophie, sitting by herself at a corner table, her chin resting on her fist, staring blankly at her untouched plate. I felt like someone had punched me straight in the gut. Pete must have seen my face because he clapped a hand on my shoulder, steady and firm. "Got sent around town this morning," he said. Whole group chat lit up. Words spreading fast. I handed the phone back and leaned against the workbench, trying to catch my breath. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It wasn't just selfishness. It was abandonment. Neglect. Proof that Jenna wasn't fit to care for a goldfish, let alone 2 kids who were already hanging by a thread. The anger that had been smoldering quietly inside me for weeks roared to life, hot and fierce. I pulled out my burner phone and called Victor. "Lane Law," he answered on the first ring, crisp and alert as always. "It's Jason," I said, my voice tight. "You need to see something." I forwarded him the video. Within seconds, he texted back. "This changes everything." Victor didn't waste time. That afternoon, he drove out to meet me at a coffee shop near the motel. He was dressed sharp, dark blazer, silver cufflinks, hair neatly combed back. But there was an edge to him today. A focused, almost predatory energy. He slid into the booth across from me, pulled out his laptop, and got to work. "We'll submit this with the rest of the evidence," he said, typing quickly. "The judge won't just see negligence. He'll see a pattern. A lifestyle." He clicked through files with practiced ease, scree. Piece by piece, he assembled the truth Jenna had been trying so desperately to hide. "She's not going to survive this," Victor said, not unkindly. "At least not in court." I stared down at my coffee, black and untouched. Part of me felt numb. Another part of me felt like standing up and shouting. Finally, the lies were catching up to her. But underneath it all was a deep, throbbing sadness. It didn't have to be this way. There was a time Jenna and I had dreamed of a simple life. A real home. Laughter echoing through the hallways. Birthday candles and late-night talks. I had built everything on the foundation of that dream, only to realize too late that I had been the only one trying to hold it up. Victor closed his laptop with a snap. "We're ready," he said. "Court date's next week. And when we walk into that room, we're not throwing mud. We're presenting facts. Clean. Solid. Unshakable." I nodded, feeling the weight of it settle on my shoulders. This wasn't about revenge. This was about rescue. When I got back to the motel, Pete was waiting for me in the parking lot, 2 beers in hand. He didn't say anything, just handed one to me and clinked the bottles together. "To freedom," he said simply. We sat on the curb, sipping slowly, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The air smelled like dust and dry grass. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. You think it'll ever stop hurting? I asked finally, staring at the glowing horizon. Pete took a long pull from his beer before answering. Nope, not completely. But one day, it won't control you anymore. I nodded, letting the words settle in my bones. That night, I packed a small duffel bag, jeans, a clean shirt, the old watch Sophie had given me for Father's Day 2 years ago. I wasn't running. I wasn't leaving. I just needed to be ready. Ready for whatever storm Jenna would try to unleash when she realized the walls were closing in. Ready to stand tall when the lies collapsed around her. Ready to be the father Sophie and no one needed, steady, unbreakable, and true. I didn't sleep much. I lay awake in the motel bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the whine of the air conditioner. When my phone buzzed at 2:17 a.m., I knew before I even looked that it would be her. Jenna. I let it ring. Then I listened to the voicemail. Her voice was slurry, thick with alcohol and desperation. Please. Jason, just come home. We can fix this. The kids need you. I need you. Derek's gone. Cameron's a mistake. I miss you. I miss us. Please. The message broke off into sobs. I sat there in the dark, listening to the woman I had once loved unravel on a tiny, cracked speaker. And I felt nothing. No hate. No pity. No desire to fix it. Just a quiet, solid sense of closure. Champagne had turned to ash. The party was over. And in the ruins, I wasn't the one left crawling through the wreckage. I was standing on solid ground, waiting. Not for her, but for my children. And for the real life we would build, far away from the broken dreams and empty promises she had left behind. The courthouse wasn't grand or impressive the way you see on TV. It was a squat gray building, the paint peeling off the shutters, the sidewalks cracked with weeds pushing through. It looked tired, the kind of tired you feel deep in your bones after carrying too much for too long. I pulled into the parking lot about an hour early. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. I just needed a moment to breathe. I sat in the car, staring at the courthouse doors, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. It all came down to this. Across town, Jenna was probably rehearsing her performance. I could already picture her standing in front of the judge, tears brimming in her eyes, painting herself as the abandoned wife, the overworked mother, the woman who had struggled so bravely against the odds. And once, a long time ago, I might have believed it. Not today. Today, the truth would speak louder than any fake tears ever could. I grabbed my folder from the passenger seat, neat, heavy, solid, and stepped out into the cold morning air. My boots crunched over gravel as I crossed the lot. Every step felt like a closing door, sealing off the life I once had and opening another I hadn't yet fully stepped into. Inside, the courthouse smelled like paper and old coffee. People shuffled down the halls, whispering to their lawyers, avoiding eye contact. I checked in at the front desk, was directed to Family Courtroom B, and sat down on the hard wooden bench outside. Victor arrived 15 minutes later, sharp and calm as ever, a leather briefcase swinging from his hand. He spotted me, gave a quick nod, and sat down beside me. You ready? He asked. I nodded. You're calm, he said, almost sounding surprised. I've already lived through the worst, I replied. This is just the paperwork. He smiled slightly and leaned back against the wall. Good. That'll work in your favor. The bailiff called our case shortly after. I stood, smoothed the front of my jacket, and followed Victor into the courtroom. Jenna was already there, seated at the petitioner's table with her lawyer, Connor Fields. He looked exactly like I had expected. Too perfect hair, an expensive suit just a little too tight, and a smirk that screamed overconfidence. Jenna wore a modest navy dress, her hair pulled back into a neat bun, minimal makeup. She looked fragile, delicate, exactly the image she wanted to project. When she spotted me, something flickered in her eyes. Maybe regret. Maybe rage. Maybe just the cold realization that I hadn't come crawling back the way she had hoped. The judge entered, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a voice that left no room for nonsense. She took her seat, called the session to order, and motioned for Jenna's side to begin. Connor stood and launched into a speech so rehearsed I could practically see the cue cards floating in front of him. He painted Jenna as a hard-working mother abandoned by her selfish husband. He talked about how hard she had fought to keep the house, how she struggled to raise 2 children alone while enduring unimaginable emotional hardship. I listened without flinching. The judge listened too, her face unreadable, occasionally jotting down a note. When it was our turn, Victor stood slowly, almost lazily, as if he had all the time in the world. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't attack. He simply laid out the truth. One by one, he submitted the evidence. Mortgage records showing I had paid off the house completely 6 months before I left. Receipts showing Jenna's student loan paid in full by me. The video of the Freedom Cake party, balloons, confetti, and Jenna's drunken laughter as she toasted to leaving me. Photos of Jenna out at clubs, abandoning Sophie at restaurant tables while she flirted with men. Testimonies from Sophie's teachers, Ms. Graves, and even neighbors expressing concern over Jenna's behavior and the children's well-being. Every time Victor presented another piece of evidence, I could see Jenna shrinking a little more in her seat. Connor tried to object, tried to spin the narrative back in their favor, but Victor was methodical, calm, ruthless in a quiet, surgical way. He wasn't attacking Jenna's character. He was exposing her choices. Piece by piece, the story she had built crumbled into dust. When Victor sat down, the judge leaned forward slightly, steepling her fingers. "Mrs. Hart," she said, her voice even, "do you have anything you wish to submit in your defense?" Jenna's hands trembled slightly as she rifled through her stack of papers. But there was nothing solid there. No photos. No records. Just tear-stained accusations and half-truths that dissolved under the weight of actual evidence. The judge glanced between us, between Jenna's performance and my quiet patience, and then nodded sharply. "I have seen enough." Her decision was swift, and when it came, it hit Jenna like a hammer. Temporary full custody to me. Supervised visits only for Jenna. Immediate compliance with a full evaluation before any custody adjustments would even be considered. The gavel struck, sharp and final. Jenna let out a broken gasp, covering her mouth with her hand. Connor leaned toward her, whispering furiously, but she barely heard him. She was staring at me, not with anger now, but with something closer to disbelief. As if she couldn't understand how the narrative she had clung to for so long had slipped through her fingers. I stood up slowly, my body steady, my mind strangely quiet. Victor clapped me on the back as we left the courtroom, his voice low and satisfied. "You did good, Jason. You stayed true." Outside, the sun was brighter than it had any right to be. It stung my eyes, but I didn't mind. I had come into this fight not for revenge, not to crush Jenna under the weight of her mistakes, but for Sophie and Noah. For a life built on something real. And today, for the first time in a long time, truth had spoken louder than lies. Jenna could keep her games, her performances, her broken promises. I was walking away with something far greater. The right to start over. The right to build a new home. The right to be the father my kids deserved, steady, strong, and free. And no matter what storms Jenna might try to summon next, I knew deep down that we would weather them. Together. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the new house was how quiet it was. Not the heavy, miserable silence of the motel room, but a different kind of quiet, open, clean, full of possibility. It wasn't much to look at, not yet. The floors creaked when you stepped on them. The walls were a patchwork of faded paint and nail holes. The kitchen smelled faintly of dust and old lemons. But it was mine. Not Jenna's. Not anyone else's. Just mine. Pete had helped me find it. A small fixer-upper about 20 minutes from the garage. Nothing fancy. A crooked front porch. A sagging fence in the backyard. But it sat at the end of a long street where kids rode their bikes without fear, where neighbors waved from their driveways, where nobody knew my past or cared. It was exactly what we needed. The day after the court hearing, I signed the papers. No hesitation. No second-guessing. I moved my few belongings in the same night. An old mattress. A duffel bag of clothes. A photo of Sophie and Noah I had printed at a grocery store kiosk. I slept on the bare mattress on the floor, listening to the house settle around me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I dreamed about the future instead of the past. 2 days later, I picked up Sophie and Noah. They stood stiffly on the curb outside Jenna's mother's house, backpacks slung over their small shoulders, their faces a mix of hope and fear. Jenna wasn't there. Her mother did the handoff, lips pressed tight in a line, like she was handing over a bag of groceries instead of 2 living, breathing kids. I knelt down to Noah's height first, opening my arms. For a second, he hesitated, wide-eyed, unsure. Then he launched himself at me, burying his face in my neck, his arms squeezing so tight I almost couldn't breathe. Sophie was slower, older, wiser. Her eyes searched mine, looking for cracks, for signs that this was just another moment that would break apart. I didn't rush her. I just stood there, steady as a mountain, until finally, she took a step forward and wrapped her arms around my waist. "We're going home," I whispered against her hair. Our home. The drive back was quiet. Sophie stared out the window, earbuds in, lost in whatever music helped her escape. Noah chattered nervously about everything and nothing, a new cartoon he liked, a funny dog he saw at the store, a dream he had last night. I let him talk. I didn't press Sophie. I just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting where Noah could see it, steady and present. When we pulled into the driveway, Sophie frowned slightly. This doesn't look like before. No, I said. It's different. But it's ours. We get to make it what we want. Noah ran inside first, backpack bouncing behind him, yelling about how many rooms there were, how much space there was to play. His voice echoed off the empty walls, full of life, full of hope. Sophie stood on the porch for a long moment, looking at the cracked steps, the chipped paint, the crooked mailbox. It's not perfect, she said quietly. No, I agreed. It's not. But it's real. She looked at me, her eyes serious in a way no 14-year-old should have to be, and then she nodded once, sharp and sure. I'm tired of fake, she said. Me too, kid. Me too. We spent the first night sleeping on mattresses on the floor. I made spaghetti from a box, and we ate sitting on the living room floor, plates balanced on our knees, laughing when Noah dropped a meatball and the dog, a mutt from the shelter Pete had introduced me to, gobbled it up in one bite. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. But it was ours. Over the next few weeks, we rebuilt piece by piece. I let the kids pick the colors for their rooms, bright blue for Noah, deep purple for Sophie. We painted together, getting more paint on ourselves than the walls, laughing until our stomachs hurt. I fixed leaky faucets and squeaky doors. I built bunk beds from scratch for Noah and helped Sophie set up a desk where she could draw again, something she hadn't done in months. We planted flowers in the front yard. Nothing fancy, just some sunflowers and daisies, but they stood proud and bright against the tired old house, a sign that life was coming back. Slowly, the walls that had built up between us started to crumble. At first, Noah clung to me constantly, like he was afraid I might vanish if he blinked. I let him. I held him through nightmares, through tears he didn't understand. I answered every question patiently, no matter how many times he asked if I was really staying. I was staying. For good. Sophie was harder. She carried her hurt differently, tucked deep inside, behind sarcastic comments and long silences. But I didn't push. I just showed up, again and again, steady and unshakable. And one night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she leaned her head against my shoulder without a word. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, feeling the weight of her trust settle against me like the most precious thing in the world. One evening, after dinner, Noah stood in the middle of the living room, arms outstretched, grinning wide. "This is the best house ever," he announced. I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Why's that, buddy?" "Because you're here," he said simply. "And we get to be messy. And happy. And us." Sophie snorted but didn't deny it. She just rolled her eyes fondly and went back to painting her nails. I watched them, feeling something warm bloom in my chest. Not pride. Not relief. Something stronger. Hope. Real hope. Not the kind that depends on someone else choosing you. Not the kind that disappears when someone walks away. The kind you build with your own hands, steady and true. That night, after the kids were asleep, I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by mismatched furniture and scuffed walls and the soft hum of a house coming back to life. And I knew, deep down, in a way I couldn't explain, that we were going to be okay. Maybe not perfect. Maybe not the fairy tale Jenna once chased. But real. And real was better. Real was everything. Some mornings, I still wake up with a start, heart racing, half expecting to hear Jenna's voice calling from another room, that old tightness squeezing my chest. But it's different now. It fades quicker. The nightmares don't hold me hostage anymore. Instead, when I blink the sleep from my eyes, I hear Noah's soft snoring down the hall, Sophie's music playing quietly behind her door, the creak of the house settling into itself like an old friend stretching its arms. I hear home. It's not a perfect life. I wouldn't pretend it is. Bills still pile up faster than I'd like. The dishwasher rattles like it's considering quitting every time we run it. Some nights, the loneliness creeps up, whispering about the family I thought I would have forever, about the promises that turn to smoke. But then I sit down at the dinner table, across from two kids who still laugh too loud, still argue over who gets the last slice of pizza, still look at me like I'm the safest place they know, and I remember why I chose this. Freedom isn't free. It costs you comfort. It costs you illusions. It costs you pieces of yourself you didn't even know you were holding on to. But it gives you something priceless in return. It gives you truth. It gives you peace. Sometimes Sophie helps me paint the living room after school, blasting old songs from my playlist, teasing me about my terrible taste in music. Other times Noah and I fix up the backyard, hammering boards into place for a treehouse he's been dreaming up. It's slow work. Messy. Imperfect. But it's ours. Every crooked nail, every paint splatter, every sore muscle at the end of the day feels like a scar we earned together. Jenna still tries, in her own way, to worm her way back in. At first, it was the crying phone calls, the "I'm so sorry, Jason" voicemails that piled up like junk mail. Then it turned into social media posts, subtle barbs meant for me to see. Photos of her laughing with friends, captions about new beginnings, and strong women who rise above. It didn't move me. Not anymore. I learned, after everything, that her world ran on attention, good or bad. What she feared most wasn't losing me. It was losing her audience. And I refused to play a part in her show ever again. Victor handled the final paperwork with precision. Custody arrangements were finalized. Jenna was ordered to complete parenting classes before unsupervised visits could even be considered. Financial support was set, straightforward and minimal, no drama, no loopholes she could exploit. Every time a new notification came through, another legal form, another appointment, I signed it calmly. Without anger. Without bitterness. It was done. It was over. The chain she wrapped around my neck so carefully over the years had finally snapped, and the air was cleaner without them. One Saturday afternoon, after a long morning of fixing up the porch railing, Noah tugged at my sleeve, his face serious. "Are we staying here forever, Dad?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked, taking in the way his cheeks had filled out again, the way his eyes didn't carry that lost, haunted look anymore. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "Forever." He grinned and raced back to his pile of Legos, building towers that reached higher every day. Sophie wasn't as quick to trust the word forever. She'd seen more, felt more. She was old enough to understand how fast forever can turn into goodbye. But little by little, she started planting roots too. She signed up for art club again. She helped me cook dinner without being asked. She started leaving her door open at night, just a crack, so the soft sound of family could drift in. One evening, after the sun dipped low and turned the sky gold and purple, the three of us stood by the battered old mailbox at the end of our driveway. I held a can of red spray paint, and Noah handed me a roll of stencils he found at the craft store. "What should we call it?" I asked. Sophie tilted her head, considering. Noah bounced on his toes, bursting with excitement. "New Roots," Sophie said finally, her voice thoughtful. "This house, it's not perfect. It's not the same. But it's where we start over." I smiled, the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep inside, not just from habit.